Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting into the second grand finals for this weekend between TSM and Flyquest, and we've got 5 full games of action to cover here, and we're going to be jumping into game number 1 right now, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of picks and bans, so without further ado, let us get into this series and opening up with some big games. So welcome to game number 1. We're going to kick things off with a lot of interesting things here. Now, Flyquest are on blue, TSM are on red, and we're going to see some big bans here, and every time I mention a champion, I'm only going to mention their specifics once, and then we'll briefly glance over them for the rest of the series. So we kick off game 1 with a Lucian ban, a Nidalee ban, a TF ban from Flyquest, and Thresh, Lilia, and Shen from TSM. Now, Lucian makes a lot of sense to be banned out against TSM because it's a pick that they've rocked in previous series to great perfection in the top side for Broken Blade. He's carried on it, I do believe, in the Golden Guardian series. It was a big pick for them, and as a whole, works very well. Nidalee also is a combo champion for TSM because they use it alongside a Renekton to essentially get some big damage out in the jungle, and it's one of their bigger main AP carries in the jungle that Speaker's looked exceptional on since that second Gold Guardian series. As for the third champion, the TF, makes sense. You don't want TSM roaming like they did against Team Liquid. Banning out a champion like TF means that Bjergsen's going to more than likely be staying in the mid lane, not being as big of a threat as what people see him as, and as such, making a very big impact player forced to mostly stay in lane. Now, TSM side of things, they ban out the Thresh. They don't want this playmaker that usually comes through for either team to go through here. Big player that's a Ignar sort of pick. Obviously, Ignar is known for being a very aggressive support, so banning out champions like Thresh, where he can reposition Turtle, who is known to be a very aggressive bot laner, makes a lot of sense, and so removing this big pick is good. Santorin's Lilia is not going to come through here, and I don't think we've seen Speaker rock this champ either, but it's a champion in the jungle that's a full AP carry that's very powerful, and it's kind of funny how these bans are going because it's going tit for tat. TSM banned Thresh because Flyquest banned Lucian. Nidalee gets banned by Flyquest, an AP carry jungler. TSM ban the other AP carry jungler that's very powerful at the current stage. Flyquest banned the TF, roam heavy mid laner with a TP in his kit. TSM ban Shen, their big pick that they've actually kind of revolutionized in recent weeks with the River Shen in the previous series against Team Liquid. I like this ban. Obviously, if you remove one big roaming champion, you gotta remove the other, and removing the Shen makes a lot of sense here for TSM, and as such, I like this ban, considering the fact that you would have thought it would have been slipped through, and essentially Flyquest, if they prioritize their ADC first, TSM get their ADC and this Shen. So it makes a lot of sense for TS. I don't actually think it makes a lot of sense for TSM to do this, considering the fact that they've actually showed their strength with this pick. So we get into the first round of picks, and what do you know, the Caitlyn's left open. If it's not banned, it gets first picked, and that's a big thing, because Caitlyn's very strong. She's a siege heavy champion that's still waiting a few nerfs to that kit of hers. Obviously, teams like to use her right now because sieging meta is strong. She provides power on the side to allow you to essentially get objectives for free, and it's a pick that realistically suits Wild Turtle to the core. It's a very aggressive pick that can poke down lane opponents and harass them with ease. However, that does mean the Ashe and the set go over to TSM. Ashe is a good pick into Caitlyn because you get a bit more poke. You can slow down a Caitlyn who isn't that mobile. I guess with the 90 caliber net she gets a bit of mobility in her kit, but she isn't the mobilest of carries, and Ashe can chase down targets with ease. Also, Caitlyn likes to lock herself in place with the Ace and Hull, so the Enchanted Crystal Arrow from Ashe can lock her up and do a lot of work to that body. Now, Set works well alongside this Ashe because he can just use his face breaker to then lock up the target when they're already hit by an arrow, and if the arrow lands flush in a team fight, he can showstopper that target who's stunned up into the backline and then land the face breaker to basically kill off the back line of Flyquest. And with Caitlyn, as I said, being very immobile, this set will do a lot of work to that Flyquest bot line, and I love this pick for TSM. It's very good early agency in champion. However, Flyquest respond with another ADC in the Graves for the jungle, so it's more than likely going to be Set versus Graves, and Set versus Graves favors the Graves late game, favors the Set early, and I feel that this jungle duo between Santorin and Speaker are very, very powerful at carrying games. They're very good playmakers, and this series is going to be around the playmaking aspect of each team. And realistically, Set versus Graves, I think Set's highly favoured because he can get more playmaking abilities off, whereas Graves is there to farm realistically as a jungler. He isn't the most gank heavy jungler, he's more the farm up to late, be relevant late and do damage. That's his goal. And when he's got an Ornn paired alongside him in the top lane, you know that this Flyquest squad want to go late and outscale how TSM play, because Ornn provides scaling to his team. If you don't get what I mean by that, he has a thing called ornaments, or that's the dub term for him. Essentially, items that he upgrades items for champions, and that's a big thing. It means that you get extra power levels the other team will not get, and realistically you control a lot more strength, especially with a decent engage tool with the Call of the Forge God, and then the Bellows Breath to kind of negate sort of engage from TSM, like, I don't know, the Showstopper, you're not getting thrown backwards. The Enchanted Crystal Arrow, yeah, I just blow fire at it and melts. Yeah, that's the strength of this Ornn pick, and it makes a lot of sense into TSM, though it's time we talk about the pick that makes TSM famous nowadays, and I always say it on Twitter, don't give Bjergsen Zilean. They gave Bjergsen Zilean, and they're going to pay their price for this. Zilean, fantastic champion. It doesn't get too much play because it's quite mechanical and isn't seen to be that strong, though it's been picked up more and more by teams in my opinion, and it provides a revive to your team that gets a cooldown lowered very quickly to about 20 to 30 seconds at max level. So you could be reviving two teammates in a fight in the late game. And with how Flyquest have kind of drafted scaling, I feel this Zilean negates the scaling aspect of Flyquest, because if he gets to late game, it's done. You're toast if you're Flyquest, because he's just going to hit them double bombs, he's going to speed up his team to chase you down, and he's also going to be essentially winning team fights by just reviving all his fallen comrades. And with a Set who's going to be fairly bulky, yeah, you don't want a full bulky Set being revived and in your face once again. So I love this pick for TSM. It's kind of their bread and butter in playoffs so far, and you don't give Bjergsen Zilean as we head into the ban play phase for phase number 2. So our second ban phase is kicked off with TSM removing the LeBlanc for themselves, removing that strong middle lane pick for Power of Evil that has a lot of roam potential to get his lanes going, and I like this. It puts power of evil towards this control mage. Something that can essentially control the lane to stop Bjergsen from doing whatever he wants. And realistically, it's the only kind of response to a Zillion is to go with control mage. So removing LeBlanc, who would essentially burst out a target before Bjergsen could essentially put his ult on someone, is a good idea for TSM. And what's more, the next response of bans is from Flyquest. They ban the Hecarim, and that makes slight sense to me. Obviously, with the set being locked in as a flex, realistically, that is more than likely going into the jungle for TSM, because TSM in previous series, like the TL and the C9, they like to save last pick on red side as a counter pick for Broken Blade, and technically Hecarim would be a good option for TSM to flex in, but in my opinion it isn't the right one. Now, the next ban from TSM side of things is Syndra. Makes sense, it's a strong control mage in the mid lane, and you look at the bans that come through for the mid lane. Lucian, TF, Syndra and LeBlanc. There's 4 mid lane bans here already. And realistically it's 5 if you class as Zillion, because TSM have already picked their mid. There's not too many strong AP mid laners in the game, considering the fact that Graves has been locked in for Flyquest as their jungler. They need some AP into their lineup, especially with Caitlyn and Ornn. They've gone basically through all their carry roles other than mid in terms of having strong AP, yet they haven't got any. So TSM banning out AP mid laners is smart, and realistically there isn't too many big options for Flyquest to go towards. And their last ban in this phase from Flyquest was the Leona ban. Not much more to say other than it's smart, because TSM like to play the Rakan. I've said this quite a lot in previous series, because TSM big Rakan lovers. So Zignar, in the previous time these two faced off in a best of 5, that Rakan pick was highly contested by both teams. It was a major thing that these two rosters fought over for tooth and nail, and I'm actually surprised it didn't get contested as heavily in this series, because it was such a big pick for both teams in getting to these grand finals as a whole. But nonetheless, the Leona ban makes sense, in a sense that if TSM locked it in as their blind pick in this second pick phase, then they'd have the counter. Well, they wouldn't have the counter. Why would... Basically, Flyquest are daring TSM to pick Rakan, and Fly, if it's available, would have gone for it. They're kind of trying to call TSM's bluff. That's sort of the ban there with that Leona. And realistically, I would have honestly banned Rakan and gone with how they've gone. But, you know, it's Flyquest, they do what they want, thug life, you know. But yeah, let's move into our last pick phase, where there's Fortune. So let's round these drafts out nicely. We start with TSM picking up the Camille for themselves. Makes sense, give Broken Blade a carry top laner. Realistically, there isn't too many big counters. I guess you would say Jax as an option, but obviously Flyquest locked in the Ornn already. Unless you're going to play Ornn support or mid, it makes 0 sense for TSM not to pick their top laner now and save counter pick for the support role. Makes a lot of sense here actually for TSM. And Camille, very big carry top laner. In a sense, it works quite well with the set, because you can showstopper a target, isolate them into a hook shot from the Camille, and then you put them in the Hextech ultimatum. They're essentially trapped with TSM, and it's a big powerful combination that TSM have. I like it a lot, and it's a very powerful combo. As for the response from Flyquest, they go with the Lux and the Victor as their last 2 picks for their draft, and Lux makes sense. Big pokey champion to go alongside the Caitlyn. Though Morgana is technically available, I think Flyquest go with the Lux because they prefer a bit more AP damage, and it also provides shielding. If you look at the TSM squad, there's not too many things on their squad side that would be affected by Black Shield from a Morgana, so they've instead, because they want to go more teamfighty, they've gone with the Lux who can provide shields instead of a Black Shield. It makes a bit more sense for the team fighting aspect of their draft. As for the Victor, I'm not too sure about it. Yes, it's a Power of Evil pick that he can pull out whenever, but you waste a bit too much gold towards your Hex Core item. You have essentially a kit that's not too strong in the current stages of League. There's other mid laners that you could go towards, like an Azir, like an Orianna, like even a Zoe, but Zoe wouldn't be picked into Zilean. That is suicide. Ori makes more sense because you can shockwave the target down and play control against the Zilean and outplay him, basically. That would have been probably the safer option, though Power of Evil wants to go for this Victor that has got quite limited range in my opinion in terms of his skills in comparison to a Zilean. But hey ho, it's a pick, it works, it does AP damage, though it is very immobile and it's just not that strong anymore. The last pick though is the counter to the Lux in my opinion. It's TSM saying, okay, if you didn't take, say, a Nautilus here or a Blitzcrank for Ignar, then we'll go for something. Maybe even the Lux themselves or the Morg. But Ashe goes so well with this Karma that TSM are locked in. More poke with the Qs and empowered Qs. There's technically a tether. Obviously, the W from Karma does root targets, though it is very hard to actually proc the root part of it. You also provide speed to the Ashe to chase down targets as well as a shield. You have your own AoE shield to kind of counteract the Lux shield. It makes a lot of sense to me. If Flyquest, wanted to go for this teamfight heavy comp, TSM have matched them. And I absolutely adore this style from TSM. And without further ado, let's get this little showreel going with the two teams, and let's jump into game number 1, where we see who comes out on top. It wouldn't be an Anarchy analysis video without us starting a play around the Drake, and what we see here is TSM, 4 members actually going into the river, with Ashe slightly going towards this bot wave to get this wave pushed into this second tier turret to get the essential push in and force Flyquest to respond. Now, Fly, on the other hand, have Camille to deal with, who's behind them as well. And that is an interesting thing because Camille can immediately jump onto them. Now, up to the top half of this fight, we see Ornn being dealt with by the Karma, who is just keeping him away from being able to frontline or do anything. And TSM are just landing poke after poke. Then is the Call of Forge God landing onto 2 members from the Ornn there. And then TSM are like, screw it, we need to go in. Showstopper onto the Bellows Breath Ornn means the Ornn is not getting away. And the set's just blasting himself into the backline of Flyquest and is able to pick up the first kill of the fight. Now it's just Zilean picking up kill after kill, and kind of unfortunate timing there from Flyquest allows the reset, aka the revive, onto the Camille, who then goes on a tear in the rest of this team fight, picking up for herself a kill and then a couple more assists onto the Flyquest members. And then what do you know, she dives the turret, she goes in, gets the ace. TSM absolutely decimate Flyquest on this sort of split front team fighting style that they've gone with in this game. And this setup that they're going with this set, with this Camille, is very powerful, and they've managed to grab themselves Infernal Soul, which allowed for the extra power in executing targets in that fight. Just a little bit of misplays from Flyquest, obviously allowing the Camille to revive kind of cost them that fight, as being able to kill her off as the second kill of the fight would have maybe allowed for Flyquest to essentially turn around that fight and decimate TSM, but that's not what happened. Instead, what we see is TSM wiping the floor with Flyquest, getting the Infernal Soul, getting the Baron, and winning game number 1 here in excellent fashion. Welcome to game number 2. Flyquest start on blue, TSM on red, and the bans don't change realistically that much. There's only one change of bans from game 1, and game 1 was Lucian, Nidalee, TF, Thresh, Lilia and Shen. That was game 1. Game 2, the only change is the TF. It is now not on the bench. It has now been replaced by the Zilean that was shown by Bjergsen in game number 1. Big switch up, obviously you don't give Bjergsen Zilean, and Flyquest I don't think are gonna give him this pick anymore this series, and as such this ban makes a lot of sense. It carried hard in game 1 and realistically was a very impactful pick for TSM. Now looking at the first round of picks here, Caitlyn is once again available, so Flyquest go for it. The strong ADC is available, they're always gonna take it, and realistically that does mean the Ashe goes over to TSM as well as the set. No changes yet in terms of the actual picks, but yeah, the Graves and the Ornn once again come through for Fly. We're seeing a repeat of game 1, but obviously we cannot get a repeat draft of game 1. Well, technically there is a way, and TSM pick up the TF that was banned in game 1. TSM with a very good comp that they're recycling from the TL series, where they picked these 3 champions, or well, the Shen was one of them as well, and they look to focus the map and play hard and aggressive, and TF has a high amount of roam potential, and when you get hit by the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, you then have a Destinying gold card TF coming in to ruin your day. Now, looking at the second round of bans as a whole, Ori and Syndra TSM remove, once again targeting Power of Evil's pool, put him on something he's uncomfortable on. And Flyquest respond in a sort of similar way. They ban out the Volley, they ban out the Camille. Interestingly, they don't ban out the Aurelia, that's something that Broken Blade's fallen back to. But Volley getting banned, a bit of a shock. I mean, yes, technically the set is still Flex, but as a whole, I would have preferred maybe targeting the support pool once again and putting them onto one of their weaker picks. Nonetheless, the Camille ban makes a lot of sense. It was used in game 1. Ori makes sense to me alongside the Syndra. No control mages going into the hands of PoE that are strong. That being said, it does mean that LeBlanc slips through the draft, but LeBlanc into TF is slightly TF favoured because he can just stun her before she jumps into him. Now, first pick for TSM in this phase, they're not pulling any punches. They go with the Jax. They had Camille in game 1, they now get the Camille counter in Jax for game 2. Jax is big into Ornn as well because you counter strike the autos from the Ornn who's trying to proc his grasp. Essentially, you're not allowing the grasp procs to happen, and thus Ornn doesn't become as tanky as what people expected. Now, the response from Flyquest is to give the Pantheon over to Ignar, and then the Azir has finally been picked up here for Flyquest. I prefer this draft more than the game 1 draft here for Flyquest, though the Pantheon's a bit of a strange one. Yes, it is a roam matching champion to the Zilean. Yes, it does sort of the same thing, but realistically I prefer an actual full-on playmaker, like a Nautilus, like the Blitz. Something like that for Ignar would make a lot of sense, though we don't end up seeing it. And what we do end up seeing is this Pantheon that can negate damage. That is a big thing. He negates so much damage in his kit, and it's very good into TSM, like the Jax, because you negate his poke, you negate the enchanted crystal arrows, you negate a lot of things, though you cannot negate a tempered fate. Bard gets locked in for TSM here. Big pick. Even though it was a bit troll in the previous series that Biofrost used it in, it's still a strong pick. Objective control and objective control this TSM squad has, and I feel TSM are gonna go towards the Cloud or whatever Soul Drake it is, stacking it up quickly and powerfully. And Flyquest, they just want to contest it around objectives, as essentially that is the two drafts. And we're going to get into game number 2, where there's pretty much all underlined Flyquest. So for this play, I kind of want to outline the importance of the Bard in the set in this team comp for TSM. And what we see right now here is TSM on two fronts. One side taking the Drake, the other side trying to force Flyquest away. Now, they do not get it, and this is where the power comes in. Temper Fate from Bard stuns up 2. Set uses a Facebreaker to knock himself into the backline with the Pantheon, and then the Facebreaker onto the members that have been invulnerable by the Bard gets TSM 3 kills. Now TSM look to dive the turrets with the Bard's Magical Journey, and what do you know, the Ornn and the Graves are the last 2 targets for TSM to kill. They do this pretty easily with their tankiest members soaking up damage of the turret before dropping aggro, and TSM come away with the ace, as well as pressure towards the Baron, which spawns in 30 seconds. Now, as a whole, this combination from TSM is very powerful because you can showstopper a target to get to the people that are invulnerable, like we just saw. Facebreaker them all in, so essentially a 3-man or maybe multiple 3-men Facebreakers, and then you just lock them up indefinitely with the rest of your comp, because you also have the counter strike from the Jax, the Ash Arrow as well to set that initial play up as to happen, and then you've also got TF with the gold cards. Very strong combo that TSM have in game 2 here, that essentially allowed them to plow through Flyquest in this game and absolutely decimate them for their second win in a row in this series. It's do or die time now for Flyquest as they switch up sides to the red side of the map, and TSM end up on blue, and what you know, the bands stay relatively the same, except for the fact that Flyquest switch over to red, and instead of banning out the Lucian, they ban out the Caitlyn. Big change up, meaning that that top lane flex pick for TSM could be essentially picked up here in this series for the first time. Makes a lot of sense if they do go for it, because it technically can be flexed between mid and top for TSM, or even bot lane. I know Doublelift has actually played it in TSM's history, but first pick of this game is TSM locking in the set. They put a lot of priority on this pick in this series so far, as it's been in their first rotation of picks every single game, and realistically it's a strong pick for them. It works well, and I'm actually not too surprised that it was first picked. The response though is the Senna for Flyquest. For the first time in this series it's being picked up, and the Hecarim. Senna, big pick, scaling to late is phenomenal, providing sustain to your team in team fights, and realistically being an out and out strong champion, especially with that Hecarim, who is a speedy boy. You can put your Dawning Shadow Wall down in a fight, provide the armor to your team, and when the Heck is charging forward and trying to get into the backline, can just give him the shield and he needs to push back the enemy carries to his team, and as such is a very nice pick. Though TSM, once again, keep their draft relatively the same from game to game. TF and Ash come straight through for them, and that is a big pick in my opinion because they're keeping this pick comp going, and I'm actually amazed that the Flyquest team didn't pick the Ash for the first time this series and let the Senna go through to TSM and force TSM to essentially change up their style for this game, and that actually amazes me, but we're yet to see how well this Flyquest squad adapt, especially now that they're putting all the eggs in the Hecarim basket with this Ori pick. They finally learnt to actually pick their mid laner before the second rotation of bans, and this makes a lot of sense this time, this Orianna, because it works so well with Hecarim. You stick the ball on this horse, he carries it into the backline, boom, shockwave, boom, dead carries. That's essentially it. Very powerful pick, and I love it with this team comp that Flyquest drafted so far, and there isn't too much pressure on having to draft in an AP or AD carry into the second phase because they've got one of each in this first phase, so they can just draft what realistically they want to in this second phase and go with something they realistically like. So ban phase 2 gets kicked off very interestingly from my opinion because the Jax from the last game gets banned out. Makes sense, I guess, for it to be banned as Broken Blade popped off on that pick and realistically carried TSM to a win. The next ban's the Rakan from TSM. They're not allowing that Ignar support to go through for the first time in this series, and it actually amazes me that it's been available all 3 games so far, and this is the first time it gets banned out. Makes sense. But the last ban from Flyquest is Lucian. It is not making it through another ban phase. This is a big change up, and considering the fact that the last ban from TSM is the Mordekaiser, which is the first new pick, I guess, that we can describe here, it's actually really interesting because Mordekaiser is very good at stopping TPs. In a sense, you just put someone into a death realm and they're unable to escape it, and honestly that works quite well with this Hecarim comp because you put the TSM frontline into the death realm, Hecarim gets free access to the backline and can just charge straight through uncontested. And I like this setup for Flyquest if they were to have got that. Nonetheless, they don't. And yeah, this is quite an interesting draft so far for either team. As we move into our last pick phase, GP is available for Flyquest. The safe blind pickable top gets locked in. And what do you know, this pick makes a lot of sense for Flyquest because you've got a global on that TF and on the Ash. We need to match globals, and GP provides that in a sense to the fact that you just put the cannon barrage down, there you go, they're locked up, they're slow, dead, and that's actually huge for team fighting as well because putting the cannon barrage down applies a lot of damage, and you have so many layering abilities on this Flyquest squad that you can pretty much burst out the TSM squad if you combine them all together, and that is a big thing to note. However, TSM respond quite heavily. They bring the Bard back from game 2, that's no surprise is about, and the Ash Bard combo still reigns supreme, and they bring in the Jace for Broken Blade. A strong pick, honestly, a pick that he loves to go towards, that's very strong into GP in my opinion, because you've got the range advantage and the damage advantage in my opinion, and you realistically will be able to outfight him in lane and bully him once he gets out of the laning phase. Now the last pick in this game is Flyquest's Nautilus for Ignar. Big pick in my opinion because it's a strong playmaker. And with the setup that Flyquest has, I love this pick. It provides the lockup to the front line, it provides the lockup of the backline as well with the depth charge that's needed for the Hecarim to just go in and execute a target. It's a very strong wombo combo this Flyquest squad has got, and realistically I think they've got the better draft in this game. And it's going to be interesting to see how both teams execute though, as we jump into game number 3 of this series. So for this game, I want to talk about TSM's over-aggression in my opinion, in terms of how they go for plays. Now as you can see, they're all setting up around this mid-wave, and they think they catch out this Nautilus with the Ash Arrow, and they do slightly, but they keep going in. Once they force him away, force out his flash, they keep trying to fight. And Broken Blade's the first wave step here, as he gets immediately caught out and hit by the Hecarim and then the Senna killing him off. Then it's the double stun from Iofrost that essentially gets a lot of damage down, and then it's just TSM trying to turn it around with Double Lift stepping forward to see all these low health bars. He flashes over it, and that's the second over-aggression in my opinion, because he's flashing directly into a Nautilus who can hook him up, and there's, yes, a double kill over to Set, but spoiler alert, Flyquest are just too strong, and they're able to just kill the 4 members of TSM due to them essentially going in one by one in this game. And over-aggression from TSM from this point forward is kind of what cost them these 2 games, this one and the next game. And as a whole, the level of communication may not be on the same level as what it would be in other games, but as a whole, this was not clean team fighting from TSM. And you could see it from how they played that game there. And yeah, that's game number 3, I do believe, in a nutshell. Let us move over to game number 4. Welcome to game number 4, and what do you know, the band returned to how they were when Flyquest were last on blue side. So, if you can't guess, Flyquest are black on blue side, TSM are on red, and we get the return bands from game number 2, where we had Lucian banned, we had Nidalee banned, and Zilean banned by Flyquest, and TSM banned the Thresh, the Lilia, and the Shen. Makes a lot of sense to return to the bands that won you the game for your TSM, and Flyquest just don't want these OPs back in the hands of TSM as a whole, and that does mean picks like Caitlyn are still up and available to be first picked, which is more than likely what we're going to see, and then it'll probably be the Ashe and Set combination for TSM. Makes a lot of sense for TSM to continue with this. That being said, for Flyquest, they were forced back onto blue, so they lose that counter-picking option that they had for game number 3, in which they actually won that game, which makes a change, and as such, I think they're putting more priority on red side, these 2 teams, after this last game that was just played, cemented that red side wins games. Now, without further ado, let's jump into first picks for either team here. And what we see is the Caitlyn being locked in immediately. Pretty obvious that was going to come through. Then it's the Ashe and Set. No more needs to be said about that, because I realistically thought maybe TSM change it up here and go with the Senna Hecarim combo that Flyquest ran. But I don't think they're too in tune with that sort of style of play. Even though it would realistically work well into a Caitlyn, because you can onslaught of shadows through the trap line that she sets, and you also have the Senna to sustain and back up. I realistically think this TSM draft favours this sort of style, but here is sort of where the team comps change up for Flyquest. The Volley Bear gets locked in for Santorin. I like this pick a lot, because it means that they've got a strong duelist in the jungle that can kind of match the Set's early aggression, and also has a very similar kit in terms of the fact that they both have entry ultimates / exit ults, if you class them that way. They both have shields in their kit, they also have a stun. Very big, powerful picks, and the last pick for Flyquest in this first phase is the Azir. Makes sense to lock in this mid laner now before his pool gets pinched like it has done every single game, and I don't think this Azir would have been left open after the last game's performance on it. So Flyquest are making real good adaptation to how TSM played, though they do give over 2 counter picks in this first phase, as Bjergsen locks in his Syndra. Big pick overall, very powerful. It's what he's known for when he first joined the league, and he's got a very strong record on this champion. Now, as a whole, it does work quite well into the Azir, because you can scatter the weak, push back the Azir when he tries to slide and glide, and Emperor's divide you back into his team. You just push him back with the scatter, so essentially he cannot get anywhere near you, and you can just poke him down with your orbs. You're very strong into him, and as a whole, it's a very strong counter pick that TSM have drafted. We now move forward into our second pick phase now. We start things off with TSM, I do believe, banning out the same things they banned last game. No, they instead ban out GP that was used last game, as well as the Mordekaiser that was also banned out last game. So GP makes it onto the ban list. The global matching that Flyquest aim for in game number 3 will not be matched in game number 4, obviously with GP banned. Now, from the side of Flyquest, they ban out the Evelyn. This pick actually hasn't been banned out once in the series, I do believe. It's a big pick in all honesty as an AP carry in the jungle, and it still surprises me that Flyquest are banning out junglers when set is already locked in for TSM, and TSM, all 3 games so far, whenever they've gotten this set, have took it into the jungle. So I don't know why they're still banning out junglers, and it realistically makes no sense. That being said, this Bard ban makes a lot of sense because it's been such a nuisance in the entirety of this series. As we look at the second round of picks, we start with the Jace pickup here for TSM. Again, it's returning to the draft, and in the last game, it was still very threatening as a whole, and it still makes a lot of sense why TSM go towards this pick, especially when technically we don't know what's going to be played for solo in that top lane, and realistically you don't expect much to essentially come out against it, because you don't expect solo on a carry-esque champion like TSM play. Now, Flyquest finished their team comp out with a Pantheon, which makes sense after the last game where they won with this pick, and it soaked up so much damage as a whole and did a lot of work. And the other pick that we need to discuss is the big old Ornn. I'm not a fan of this. You have counter pick of your top lane matchup, and you still lock in Ornn. Yeah, Renekton's up, he'd have a bit of a fun time into Jace. He can actually chase down a Jace and do a lot of damage to him. But instead you go with Ornn. I've not been a big fan of it from solo this entire series, because he's been hard camped on this pick. He's just been isolating himself, and TSM are punished with that TF that they've gone towards in previous games. Now in game 5, obviously that won't be coming through, and the last pick for TSM is the Morgana. First time we're actually seeing it in this series, and I did discuss it earlier in terms of the fact that I would like to have seen it alongside the Caitlyn, but instead we've got it in this game. That Black Shield, it's going to be huge, because you look at this Flyquest squad, you've got a lot of isolated damage in terms of spells. You have the volley stun, you have the Ornn E, you've got the Pantheon point click stun. A lot of isolated spells that essentially you just chuck the Black Shield on someone, and essentially they're not getting affected by them abilities. And I love this pick for TSM because it also provides a lot more poke to the bot lane, and realistically makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that is draft number 4 done and dusted. We can jump into this team fight that we were going to be breaking down for you guys, and it's going to be a nice interesting one to look at. Welcome to Game 4. We start this play with Flyquest TPing in towards the Baron pit. They're looking to set this up with Ornn, clearing out some behind the pit vision and taking away this blast cone. Then we see the 3-man unit of Flyquest start it up with the rest of the members coming in. And this play, I want to describe the importance of Pantheon. He charges his passive up, his stacks up to 4 off of the Baron. He's going to throw a spear over the wall, put down a bit of poke. Now he steps behind into the face of the pit to tank up the damage for his team. He takes so much and gets hit by the arrow on the end of it, and then it's down to his team forcing the fight onto the backline of TSM. Volibear jumps onto the carries of TSM. He immediately executes down the Ashe, and then it's just the rest of TSM getting jumped on by this Caitlyn in terms of damage, and the Pantheon CC, giving over a nice juicy triple kill to Flyquest, and with Soul coming up in 2 minutes 40, they're essentially looking to fight with a massive power spike in the Baron, and with the gold advantage, and win the game off of that, in which they do. And what's quite important here is for TSM to realise they cannot allow that Pantheon through to game 5, because it negates so much damage. It has a lot of damage on its own, and the more interesting thing is Ignar hasn't been using it to match roams. He's just been using it as basically a Braum shield that's just far better and can soak up more damage and put out damage. And it amazes me sometimes why people don't go towards the Pantheon when instead of the Braum, because Pantheon does pretty much the same things that Braum does, but slightly better in my opinion. And as such, I love this Panther pick, and in this game we saw it showcased a lot of strength, and as such we get to move forward now into game number 5 with the scores tied 2-2. One team can walk away with the LCS championship. Who will it be? Welcome to our 5th and final game, and I'm going to keep our bans fairly short here as there's no changes between this game and the bans from game number 3, I do believe, the last time Flyquest were on red side anyway. So it makes a lot of sense that these changes don't happen. Thresh, Lilia and Shen by TSM banned out, Nidalee, Caitlyn and Zilean banned out by Flyquest if you wanted a rundown. It makes a lot of sense in my opinion for these to be banned, because this is what won Flyquest and TSM think they can run it back and win. Now, first pick for this phase is the first change up to the first pick for TSM, and they're not just going with the Ashe, they've changed over to this Senna. And I like this change up because it means that Flyquest can't immediately go in with the Hecarim Senna combo that they went with in the last time Flyquest were on red side. So what ends up happening is Flyquest get TSM's combo. The Set and the Ashe go over to Flyquest, and this is just kind of a rubbing salt in the wound by them in terms of just stealing what TSM have ran through the entire series. Now, the picks keep rolling in here really quickly as the Graves goes over to Speaker. He gets a carry jungle for once. He is actually going to be able to use this quite effectively in terms of teamfighting late game, and he's got a bit more damage towards Drakes. Something that TSM have actually turned towards in this series is controlling more objectives, and what's more important is having an amazing champion that can just reveal everyone on your team. TSM get the TF once again. Bjergsen's hands are going to be piloting this big pick for himself, and it's going to go into the Ori. Finally, Flyquest have realised they cannot allow their mid lane picks to go through to the second phase, and an Orianna makes a lot of sense into TF because you want to control the lane, you want to keep him in sort of in lane as well, and Ori I feel is a far better pick than say anything else into this TF because she can essentially push the wave a lot quicker than TF and control the lane very heavily and not allow this TF to roam as hard, which is a very nice thing to do and achieve, and realistically should win mid for Power of Evil. It's second ban phase time now, and we see the Bard once again removed off the field by Flyquest. Makes sense, don't allow the objective control champions over to TSM, and realistically not allow them how they played in game number 2 against them. It makes a lot of sense. TSM though ban out the Pantheon, first time this gets put on the ban list, and it makes sense as well. It was very practical for Flyquest to negate damage in the bot lane, and what's interesting to note here is another support ban gets added to the list here, and it's the Tahm Kench. And I love this ban from Flyquest because that Ashe and Set and Ori all have CC tools in their kit. Ashe is probably the more scary in the bot lane because of the fact that she can just fire it from anywhere and if she hits it, that target's going to be stunned. And usually Tahm Kench is just stood next to their ADC, just gobbles them up, keeps them safe. That's a big ban, and realistically makes so much sense to this team comp. And the only response that TSM go with is the Mordekaiser. Now, I don't get this ban, I haven't got this ban through the entire series. It's probably because Solo has probably shown it in scrims and has shown that he's very competent at it, and it does technically work against TF quite heavily, so I guess that's why TSM have gone towards it. But as we move into our last round of picks, Flyquest take the brave step. They lock in their support first. They're not saving counter pick for support like they have done in previous games, and that actually surprises me, and they go with the Leona. So do you remember how I said that Flyquest were trying to bait out the Rakan pick for TSM, and essentially say, hey, we've got the counter here with this Leona ban, go ahead and pick it. In the first game of the series, that's what Flyquest did. Now they've executed this sort of bait play more effectively than how they did in game number 1, because guess what? They've actually picked up the Leona this time. Makes sense, a lot of CC, a lot of engage, very hard to deal with, and is very bulky. Makes sense to go with this, and as a whole is a good pick. Now the last 2 picks for TSM is the Camille. Good, very strong pick. Obviously with Flyquest probably going for a blind pick, well, sorry, not blind pick, counter pick top, which you'd hope they go for here. It makes sense that TSM go with the carry top laner that can work so well with TF. Camille's Hextech Ultimatum plus Destiny means that target is not running, means they're gonna die. And what's more is TSM draft some more teamfight engage with this Rakan. They don't care that Flyquest have locked in the Leona. TSM just go with their comfort pick support. I love it. It's Rakan, the big pick that was used to, I don't know, win TSM's series against Team Liquid. You know, that pick? Yeah. So TSM just lock it in, strong engage, with the W entrance, with the ultimate that charms targets, with the shielding on the E. Very powerful pick, love it for TSM. And realistically, if he can dance himself through teamfights and avoid basically the CC from Flyquest, which is going to be quite hard to do because they have so much of it, he's going to probably win the fights for TSM, especially with the last pick GP coming through for Solo here. I don't get why you would save blind pick GP. It makes no sense for Flyquest to do that, and realistically, they could have technically got the same draft if they did it in the order of blind picks top lane for your your first pick of the second phase, and then obviously force TSM to finish their draft and then go with the counter pick Leona. I mean, you've tried to get a double counter pick, which you got one of them, but you didn't counter pick the Camille. GP into Camille favors Camille. in the solo lanes, I should say. When it comes to late game team fighting, I'd say GP becomes more favourable, but in my opinion, Camille is the strong pick for this lineup, and as such, should realistically win team fights and also the slide lanes a lot easier than what GP can. Nonetheless, that's going to be it for the draft for Game 5. One team can win this series right now and become the LCS champions. Let's break down this last play for this series. Welcome to Game 5. This is do or die for both teams, and TSM already have a 7k gold lead at this point. Now, Wild Turtle steps up forward into this wave on his lonesome, and then TF's like, sure, let's try and engage here. Destiny gets used, and Camille comes over from the side and immediately lands her Hexacle ultimatum onto the Ashe, but the issue is Camille's diving headfirst into 5 members of Flyquest who can immediately respond to this play that TSM tried for, and essentially she gets killed off. Now Rakan comes from behind once again, this time the flanks on Power of Evil, and TSM actually managed to pick up the kill here. Now it's Santorin forced to run, and realistically Flyquest should cut their losses here without having to go in once again and give over 2 more kills, especially with Leona, who's just coming to the fight as soon as Santorin dies and essentially gives over another kill. That's 4 kills now in total in that fight, and TSM, because of this, can turn straight to this Baron pit. Because it's cleared out, there's no vision of it other than that Hawk shot coming in. TSM get a free Baron here, and essentially Flyquest have thrown away the game after a kind of a misplay there where they should have just cut their losses and given up. And spoiler alert, this TP from Orianna is way too late, and TSM get Baron, TSM get the game as well. And this series as a whole, I'm actually amazed went 5 games. To be fair, it deserved to go all 5 games considering these two teams are so close in terms of skill levels, in my opinion, that TSM realistically, after clearly showing dominance over 2 games into the series, when Flyquest finally made a change up and altered how they played, it obviously forced TSM to have to make changes as well. And in the 5th game, we saw TSM go on blue side and absolutely show up and decimate Flyquest. As this sort of change up to the style, it makes a lot of sense, and thus I'm actually amazed that it took 5 games, as I say, but as I'm used to it, the series was absolutely amazing. I call full kudos to TSM, considering the fact that they realistically did so well to bounce back from their first series loss to Golden Guardians, to then come back against Golden Guardians after beating Dig, beat Golden Guardians, then beat the Spring Split champions in C9, then beat the team that finished first in the regular split in Team Liquid, and then beat Flyquest, who were, without a doubt, one of the best teams in playoffs by far, and I could have tipped off to actually have won this season. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new around here if you want to, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.